A 7.28 kilogram bowling ball traveling at 8.5 meters per second east collides head-on with a 4.54 kilogram bowling ball traveling 10 meters per second west. Determine the magnitude of the total momentum of the two-ball system after collision. Now, this sounds a lot like one of those collision problems. When you do these collision problems, generally what we're trying to do here is use the conservation of momentum to describe what's going on. Now, the initial momentum is equal to the final momentum, and what are we solving for here? We're looking to determine the magnitude of the total momentum of the system after the collision. So how do we do that? Well, we're solving for Pm. Notice, we're not solving for the mass or the velocity or anything like that. We just want the total momentum of the system. So to get the total momentum afterwards for the system, we can just find the total momentum initially for the system, the Pm. Now, initially, we have two different objects, and how do we find the total momentum of two different objects? By just taking the momentum of the first object, object 1, and adding the momentum of the second object, object 2. Keeping in mind that momentum is just mass times velocity, our equation looks something like this. m1 plus m1 times v1 plus m2 times v2, remember each of those are just the momentums, is equal to the total final momentum. So let's plug in here. Object 1 will be our 7.28 kilogram bowling ball, 7.28 kilograms, times a velocity of 8.5 meters per second, plus m2v2. Object 2 is going to be our 5.45 kilogram bowling ball, which has a velocity of negative 10 meters per second. I made that second velocity negative 10. Why is that? Well, notice that first bowling ball, the 7.28 kilogram one, is moving with a velocity of 8.5 meters per second east, while the second bowling ball is moving with a velocity of 10 meters per second west. The second bowling ball is traveling in the opposite direction, and we account for the opposite direction in physics using a negative. So, while we left the 8.5 to be positive, we called this 10 negative. And at this point, we can really just plug this whole thing into our calculator and figure out what the final momentum is. So when you do that, you get a value of 7.38 kilogram meters per second is equal to the final momentum. And again, since we're not looking for the mass or velocity or anything, we're just looking for that total final momentum, that's our final answer.